The winter wind swept across the lonely plains as Elias Carter rode back from his trapline, his old mule trudging through the brittle snow. Elias had lived alone for so long that the world felt quieter around him, as if even the land had grown used to his silence. But that morning, when the pale sun struggled through the grey sky, something unusual caught his eye. Near the cottonwood trees at the edge of his property. At first, he thought it was a bundle of cloth snagged on a branch. Then he saw a small arm, limp, and his heart lurched. A young Apache girl hung by her wrists from a twisted cottonwood, her feet barely touching the frozen ground. She wasn't unconscious, but she was motionless, exhausted, shivering. Her long braids were tangled, her face streaked with dust and dried tears. A rough wooden sign swung in the wind above her head. Elias squinted to read the crude letters carved into it. "White man don't forgive." The words struck him like a blow. This wasn't a warning to the girl. It was a message to anyone who found her. Elias slid off his horse, boots sinking into the cold earth. He scanned the hills, every instinct sharpened. There could be bandits waiting. There could be warriors watching. But he saw no movement, no footsteps, no shadows in the rocks. Whoever had done this was long gone. He approached slowly, hands raised so she wouldn't panic. Her eyes opened just enough for him to see the fear burning behind them. Fear mixed with defiance, a strength far bigger than her small frame. "It's all right," he murmured. "I'm not here to hurt you." She didn't answer. Her lips were cracked, her breathing shallow. But she refused to beg, refused to show weakness. Elias drew his hunting knife and cut the ropes. Her body fell forward into his arms, light as a bundle of sticks, but stiff with cold. She tried to push away, but her strength was gone. He wrapped her in his coat, lifting her gently onto his horse. "Who did this to you?" he asked, though he didn't expect her to reply. For a long moment she was silent. Then her voice came out rough and broken. "Not my people. White men, bad ones." Elias felt his jaw tighten. Bandits, men who would hurt a child. Then blame her tribe, hoping to spark a war. As he rode toward his ranch with her held safely against him, Elias knew one thing with absolute certainty. By cutting her down, he had stepped into a storm far larger than either of them. But he also knew he couldn't have done anything differently. Not then, not ever. Back at the ranch, the cabin felt warmer than usual, though Elias couldn't tell if it was the fire or the presence of the girl sitting silently on the floor near the hearth. He had wrapped her in a wool blanket and given her space, knowing she'd bolt like a frightened deer if he moved too quickly. She watched everything, every shift of his boots, every flick of flame, every sound outside, her dark eyes sharp with suspicion. Elias didn't blame her. Someone who had been tied to a tree and left for dead wouldn't trust easily, especially not a white man. He set a small bowl of broth beside her and stepped away without saying a word. For hours it sat untouched. Elias busied himself repairing a busted fence rail behind the cabin, pretending not to notice that she kept glancing through the window, studying him. When the sun dipped low and the wind grew colder, he returned inside. The bowl was no longer full. She had eaten just enough to keep herself upright. It wasn't trust, but it was survival. Later that night, she shifted closer to the fire, still wrapped in the blanket. Elias sat on the opposite side of the room, mending a torn saddle strap, letting the crackling of the logs fill the silence between them. He had seen soldiers, bandits, settlers, and outlaws, but never a child who carried herself like a small warrior. She sat straight back, her chin lifted, refusing to look broken, even though her exhaustion showed in every breath. "What's your name?" he asked gently. For a long time she stared at the flames, as if the fire itself deserved an answer before he did. Then her voice, barely more than a whisper, reached him. "Tansa." Elias nodded slowly, respecting the courage it took her to speak. "You're safe here, Tansa." Her shoulders tightened. "No one is safe. They come. They look for me." "Apache warriors?" he asked carefully. She shook her head once. "White riders, bad ones. They say Apache stole me. They want war." Elias felt something cold settle in his stomach. He had suspected it, but hearing her confirm it made the danger feel heavier. Bandits didn't just hurt her. They used her to ignite a spark that could burn the whole frontier. "They won't get you," he said, his voice firm. "You are one man," she reminded him, not with mockery but with painful truth. "Maybe so," he replied, meeting her gaze, "but I won't let them take you." For the first time her eyes softened, the fierce shield slipping just enough for hope to peek through. She didn't smile, but she didn't look away either. And in that small, fragile moment, a bond began to form, quiet, uncertain but real. Sliding toward the horizon, when Elias first felt the tremor under the ground. He paused mid-step, shovel still in his hand, listening. The earth didn't shake on its own out here. A moment later he heard it, the rhythmic drum of hooves. 6 riders moving fast, too fast for casual travelers. Tansa, who had been gathering water from the barrel, froze in place. Her hands tightened around the wooden dipper, her eyes widening with a fear she tried to hide. She didn't need to say anything. Elias knew. He set the shovel down quietly, walked inside the cabin, and lifted the rifle from above the door. By the time he stepped onto the porch, the riders were already approaching through a cloud of dust. They came in a loose formation, guns on their hips, rifles strapped to their saddles, expressions carved with the cruelty of men who believed no one could challenge them. The leader, a thick-necked man with a scar slicing across his chin, grinned when he saw Elias standing tall and unshaken. "Well, well," the man drawled, pulling his horse to a stop. "We heard you're holding something that don't belong to you." "She's a child," Elias replied, voice steady. "She's our proof," the leader corrected. "Proof Apache's been stealing white young'uns. We hang her up, make a point. Now hand her over, rancher." Elias's grip tightened on his rifle. He didn't raise it yet, but his stance made it clear he wasn't backing down. "She's not yours, and you're not taking her." The leader chuckled, like a man convinced of his victory. "You think you can stand against 6 guns? You're alone out here." Before Elias could answer, an arrow hissed through the air and buried itself in the dirt right between the riders' horses. The animals spooked, stomping nervously. Another arrow followed, then another. In the growing dusk, shapes rose on the ridge, silent. Stoic Apache warriors, their silhouettes outlined by the falling sun. Not one made a sound, but their presence spoke louder than gunfire. Tansa stepped onto the porch beside Elias, her chin lifted with a courage far larger than her years. The leader's face drained of color. "Damn it, we ain't tangling with them," he muttered, turning his horse sharply. Within seconds, all 6 riders bolted, fleeing across the plains as fast as their mounts could run. Elias let out a long, steady breath. Tansa looked up at him, her voice soft but certain. "You saved me." He shook his head gently. "No, you saved yourself. I just cut the rope." From the ridge, one Apache warrior lifted his hand, a gesture not of claim, but of respect. And for the first time in years, Elias felt the weight of loneliness lift, replaced by something quieter, stronger and deeply human.